Okay. Do you see my screen? Everybody? All right, perfect. Then welcome everybody to today's session on with digital tools towards investability. I'm very happy to have on board today Annika Basso, founder of Postage, and Scalability, founder of Nifty. Very happy to have those two here because when we talk about the usage of digital tools, we need some people like those two to actually create those tools for us to leverage them. We're happy to also have them introducing themselves in a bit. But before we go into that, I just want to let you know, throughout that session today, this is an Ask Me Anything session. So it's about your questions, your individual questions that you want to ask to those two experts here on digital tools. So at all times, feel free to use the chat function to put in your questions, and we're more than happy to pick them up as soon as we can and try to cover all of your questions individually and let them answered by the two here. Before we jump into today's session, I just want to give a short overview of what we at DueDash do in general and why we came up with today's session. So our general purpose at DueDash, for the ones who are part of the community already know, it's about making startups investable. So we already launched our community platform that you should definitely join if you haven't been part of it, where we bring together really founders, investors, experts like the two here, and other players from the ecosystem to really help startups on their fundraising journey to make them help become investable, build a business with focus, and actually receive the funding through that very targeted approach on focusing on the right type of KPIs. We're also in the process of developing a full-blown investability platform that will help you not just with the matchmaking, but actually reducing the whole due diligence efforts by up to 40%. So this is something coming up, so definitely stay tuned. But for now, feel free to join our DueDash community. Because on DueDash, we have a great variety of offers that we can provide you, going from networking, joining sessions like today's event, being able to find and post jobs, having your own exclusive community. You can get startup credits for our DueDash partners, among others, also here at Postage and Nifty, with some new platform coming up quite soon. So also stay tuned here. You have the opportunity to directly get in touch with investors and discuss all of those things that you as a founder need, do the right connections, do the customer validation that you need, all in one platform as the go-to platform for you to go forward. Among others, I just want to point out two specific things because today's session is about digital tools that help you towards investability. We already have an investment readiness check out there, which is for free. In case you turn out to be investor ready, we're happy to put you in front of real world investors in our investor lounge. You are also eligible then to claim benefits of up to 25,000 in credits. So take advantage of that. Even if you're not investor ready, at least you have a clear guidance on which directions to go to become investor ready at a later point in time. So make use of that free offer. Michael or Angie will just put a link in here so that you also know what it's all about and where to find it. I also mentioned the DueDash credits. So besides some partner credits, we are partnering with different tools, for example, like here, that can provide you some extra discount by being part of the DueDash community. But also if you've gotten first investments and you go through investment readiness check, you invite people to the platform. We have different incentives at different places where you can actually gain free credits just for your own startup usage, especially in relation to digital tools. And this is actually all I want to communicate about DueDash in general. Again, today's session is about with digital tools towards investability with those two guys here. And before we let them to introduce themselves, I just want to kind of frame today's session with the two polls that we already ran on our platform, which was asking on how many different tools are you guys actually using for your work on a weekly basis. We see that the majority of people have answered 4 to 6. And when we look at the right side of what type of tools are you using, I mean, we're in the new normal of COVID. Obviously, many people are using communication tools like Zoom here today for really getting in touch, but also project management tools and marketing automation are tools that many of you use. And this is where now Andy and Sky come into place. Maybe I just start with Sky. He's already unmuted. So Sky, please introduce yourself because he will fall under the category of project management, and the rest I would like to leave with you.
Sure thing. Thanks for the intro, Marcus. I'm Sky Calvi. I am the solutions architect and a co-founder here at Nifty Project Management. Solutions architect is kind of like a hybrid role between, I guess, sales, customer success, and product. It's just really making sure we can communicate how to use it, the values, and making sure you're using it correctly. I Actually, growing up, I went to school at UConn and I wanted to be a rock star of all things. So when I came out of school, I built an agency with my father because he gave me the latitude to kind of schedule my own day. And then when I moved to New York City, I joined an agency that kind of fell onto those same small business principles of autonomy and self-organization. That agency ran into this kind of ever-growing pain point as the roster of clients grew, which is we were using too many tools that had a lot of kind of overlapping features and use cases, but they didn't connect the dots. So we were using one tool for internal communication, one for client communication, one for managing development, one for managing design, and it just became this kind of spinning head. And so we started to conceptualize and eventually launch Nifty. We started with a product hunt launch several years ago and got a lot of buzz. And from there, we really just pushed it into a full-fledged product and have since kind of sunsetted the agency and focused entirely on Nifty. One of the things I actually want to point out is that on that list you had project management and team communication and collaboration as different segments. And that's something that we're out to change. We don't think those are different. And actually, I think project management is too often thought of as kind of Gantt bars and dependencies and not enough about just really organization and collaboration. I mean, the point of those bars, Gantt charts and all that, it's really a communication tool, right? It's like really communicating where we're going. So that's really one phase of it. And I'm sure we'll get into a little bit more of that together, but that's something that we're really looking to roll in one. And as we continue to grow, having tools like Andy's to help automate some of the other features or some of the other aspects of growing a business really kind of come into play.
Absolutely, Sky. Thanks for also clarifying this. We just discussed this yesterday in our first initial call that he said just due to Corona, we really had to accelerate the integration of Zoom into their tool.
Absolutely.
So kind of where the lines start to blur. Obviously. But thanks for your introduction here, Sky. Then I'd like to hand it over to Andy for a short introduction because he rather falls under the category of marketing automation. Or do you also have another category that you're touching with?
I think marketing is a good category. Let's stick with that. So a bit about me and my background. I started with an agency background just like Sky. I started an agency that focused specifically on a niche of legal and serving law firms. And over the years, we used a lot of different tools that had different functions or some that like overlap, like Sky's talking about. And that was a fun experience. We eventually, I think, figured out the right processes and the right tools that were for us. Then we grew and scaled and then sold that agency to another partner company of ours in the same space. And then after that, my co-founder and I of the agency went on to build Postaga, partially because of a challenge we were having related to tools, which is there are so many tools for doing basically the one process that you want to get done. For us, it was link building outreach. For if you run an agency or have a website that you want to promote and get traffic for, there are a lot of steps to the process, from finding relevant websites to reach out to tools to getting people's contact information, to tools for sending outreach email sequences and following up. And so we built Postaga to streamline all of that and have an all-in-one solution for that. And so the goal being to save you all that time, not having to export data from one tool, import it into another, and so on. And that's why we are here today. And over the years, I've used a lot of different tools, having started several businesses, and hopefully I can share some insights into the landscape.
Great. Thank you, Andy, also for your introduction. As you guys see, both of them, it's not the very first time that they're going about one startup. Both of them have tried several times. That's the spirit of entrepreneurs, never stopping and always try to find the next niche to actually work on. Again, at everybody, feel free to put in your question. That's your chance to ask experienced experts on those matters. Before maybe there is a question out there, I would just like to ask you, how are you actually making use of your own tools in a daily work life? And he's laughing. Maybe you want to elaborate a bit on how you're using Postaga to in your
Sure.
startup.
So yeah, so we are an early stage startup. We launched Postaga our official launch on Product Hunt was in May, just a few months back, and so we are very new, and we've been using Postaga along the way to promote our blogs, to get more backlinks, build our traffic up, and also to use it for cold outreach to find new potential customers, potential partners. So it helps us to find relevant websites, get those contact details, and then pitch those different websites and those different potential partners and users. So it's been going great for us so far. Yeah, that's how I've been using Postaga.
Yeah, and to that,
you use it yourself and it's working out, huh?
yeah, and to that point, I would actually say that if whenever you're building a product or a company, you're going to have an endless amount of opportunities to reflect on what you would do differently, and because of that, it actually just shapes how you're going to change things going forward. And one of the things that we really determined early on was, if we could do it all over again, jump in the time machine, one thing we would start with is start early and start often with content and backlinking. I think a lot of people think you have to be established to do that, but that's how you get established. That's how people get to know you. And that's how you can even be a big thing before you even launch. So something like Postaga, I think that's tremendously valuable to build, and DueDash for that matter. I mean, build that community, build that thought trust before you even have something that you're ready to introduce and lift the veil. For us internally, it was definitely several years in the making, putting something the magnitude of Nifty together, which combines a lot of other tools in the market. But I mean, I distinctly remember the day that we just said, like, we don't need Slack anymore, and we stopped it, and we communicate internally, and
you don't even use
tasks.
Slack?
Exactly. So I'm like, I remember being on the subway and you hear the Slack rattle on someone's phone, and I get like a flashback, you know what I mean? And I think it was the day where you feel like now you're in the boat you built, and it's solving the problems that you built it to solve. And that way your next challenge is to make sure other people can solve that problem too.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting to see, right? For other people, Slack is the number one go-to platform still, and for others, it already feels outdated. But that's obviously also based on your own project management tool that you're creating that also enables lots of that direct communication as well. That's for sure. Maybe this is a good way to also frame the next question. So Michael actually asked himself. I mean, he's in the start of his journey, he also had struggles managing all the work he had to do. He found out that digital tools can actually help him. But maybe a question to you then, saying that you didn't use, for example, Slack anymore, which struggles did you actually face, and where do you still see potential to go even more digital? So you talked about, okay, you're now creating your own tools. You see some room of improvements. You want to kind of get the lines in between communication, project management. There's no blurry anymore. Where do you see even more room of improvement?
Well, even before we get to improvement, I think one thing you need to keep in mind when you're building any product is knowing your own boundaries. So when you go to do an undertaking that's going to combine a lot of different kind of core types of tools, you need to be able to draw lines, even if not, in ink, in pencil, saying this is where our experience ends and an integrated experience begins. There's no one tool that can do everything. If it can, it's probably a pretty ghastly tool and hard to look at, or it costs, billions of dollars. So I think you need to have a good understanding of what the problem is you're trying to solve. Know that that's going to change as you go along. I mean, I'm sure what's going on at Postaga, what they're solving today is going to grow, and they're going to solve a lot more tomorrow. Same with us. So I think knowing it's a great thing to have a finger on the pulse of, even if you can't say it in words, is knowing where you end and another product experience begins, and knowing what's that sweet spot of we do it versus we integrate with it. One example I can call on for ourselves is we have a built-in docs as well. As soon as you roll out a feature, people tell you 10 more things they want that feature to do. And so before we said like, we're going to be a docs tool, we said, all right, well, let's create a two-way integration with Google Docs. So in the meantime, the most popular docs tool can also be used within Nifty. And that was a good way of kind of relieving pressure on an early stage of kind of filling customers' expectations while also having still an identity of our docs are lightweight and collaborative. They're great for meeting notes. If you need something with version control, multiple layers of indents, that's why Google Docs is there. And so that's kind of one example of knowing your strengths versus, not biting off more than you can chew.
Sure. Maybe Andy, also your thoughts on that.
Sure. I'm thinking more in part from like the user experience of like when it's time to get tools versus build them yourself or integrate with other things in your workflow. Sometimes, and I'm definitely guilty of this, you look at a tool because it comes up on Product Hunt or because it comes out in AppSumo or something like that. And you're like, oh, wow, this looks like it would be a great way to solve this one problem I have. And then it becomes another tool in your arsenal of a million different tools that you have. And maybe it does solve this one problem, but it creates others and it doesn't necessarily work well within your existing workflow. So I think it's important to just be very mindful of, is the tool that you found, is this going to work within your workflow? Is this something that you can use every day? If it's the type of thing to be used every day, or is it going to slow you down? Is it going to get in the way? Because we've definitely, I've definitely done this before where I get really excited about a new tool. I start implementing it and then I realize it doesn't integrate with the rest of my workflow how I need it to. And it doesn't like pass along data the way I need it to. And then it creates more work for me. I have to like manually export something into a CSV and then import it somewhere else. And it just makes my life more difficult rather than me. Like it may be a nice idea or a nice thing to have, but just adding the tool just to have it is not something I would recommend. So just kind of be mindful of like we were thinking about recently, what is our existing workflow? What do we have? What tools are we using every day? And I'm thinking about this now. There are a lot of tools that we're using every day that maybe we need to think about. Do we use all of them? Do we cut back on some? But as we were talking about earlier, off the record. But
yeah. And to Andy's point, I think it's when you're starting a product, when you're starting a company, you're going to be doing a million things. And so to understand and kind of the theme here, investability is really about scalability. How are we going to lay down a process that we can then explain to others? Now, I understand what you're doing today might be more involved than what you're going to be doing as you scale, because you're going to have people who fit specific roles rather than like the many hats, idiom. But I think it's important to think, like, if I need to sit here and say, in order to do my link outs or my link backs, if I go here, then I go there, then I do this, then we have to do if it sounds convoluted, it's because it is. And so I think one kind of litmus test is like, explain this to someone else. And if it sounds really insane and convoluted, it might be. So that's a good way of taking a step back versus like, hey, this is what we do today. We know that there's one area in this process that we want to automate or make a little better, but that's something we're willing to sacrifice today to have the efficiency. And then as we scale, then we can assess that again.
I think you both brought up a very, very valid point here of that just because digital tools can help you increase your productivity doesn't mean they actually do in your case, because they have to fit your internal processes that you have and enhance them rather than go against them, because some of those tools sometimes also kind of contradict each other, because like using the right fully will diminish the value of the other. So I think both of you brought up a very valid point here. And this also brings us to the next question, because it kind of ties to that. Now, each of you have your own product, as we talked about, and you already explained on how you use it on your own. But there's two questions out there that I would like to just put together in that regard. So Raquel is asking, what kind of digital tools do you use beyond your own tools? And maybe directly also answer, what do you feel are the most essential tools for startups in general that are hardly to be kind of, not be used on a daily basis by any type of startup? Or would you even say, is there any? Maybe Andy, you go first on that.
I mean, the main tools I use every day are the Google suite of tools, Google Docs, Google Sheets, email for communication. One thing that I'm really big on is I use a scheduling tool. So like something like Calendly or Book Like a Boss. There are a million different ones that they all do the same thing, which is help people to schedule time with you, which saves you the back and forth going between email, like, hey, are you free at 10 a.m. on Wednesday? No? Okay, how about 4 p.m. on Friday? This scheduling tool has been my probably favorite productivity tool for the last 5 to 7 years that I've been using them. I can't recommend it enough. Literally any of them, they're all good. They all do the same thing. They all connect to your calendar and allow people to pick times based on the parameters that you set. Can't just sell that enough. So if you don't have one, get one, because just the back and forth are nuts. Otherwise, what other tools? Those are the ones that I'm thinking about at least every day. And then I use like Slack for internal communication, although maybe it's time for us to check out Nifty.
Love the plug. Yeah. So I think I use Calendly, another plus one for Calendly. It integrates with the Google Calendar for demos. It also through Zapier, which I think Zapier is another one, or other ones like it you might 100%. Look into. Creates a task in Nifty for me. So if I miss one, reminder, I get a second set of reminders. Helps understand too, because you want to see what everyone's workflow looks like in a single place. So having all that information in a single place is really valuable. We also use Intercom for communication with people who are coming in the door, leads, prospecting, customer support. A lot of our drip campaigns, email campaigns are executed through Intercom. About 1 million development tools that I couldn't even begin to scratch the surface of. But HubSpot, we've recently started bringing HubSpot into the fold to kind of scale our sales. Do you
use HubSpot for email or just for CRM?
We do HubSpot. So you mean like personal emails?
Well, so like HubSpot has its own marketing automation suite, right. And also like a CRM.
Yeah. So right now we're just using it for the CRM. A lot of the automations we still have as part of Intercom, just because it kind of takes out a lot of the segmentation we put into Intercom.
I get it. Yeah.
It's something we're talking to HubSpot about. They definitely want us to get that over. So, it's
HubSpot. Yeah. Its tool definitely is probably a bit more expensive than Intercom for the marketing automation. Yeah.
Intercom sneaks up on you.
I've heard that. Yeah, we're on an active campaign right now for email marketing automation, and CRM. And the CRM is fine, but we really do like the marketing automation aspect of it.
Yeah. So I guess one way to think about it is maybe for different departments or different segments of your product and business, maybe have like one hub. Or like one like kind of quarterback for the whole thing. And then the other ones are like kind of role players if you need to do a thing. But I would really actually kind of think of it as like a tool belt. And if you're a handful of people and you're bringing around this enormous tool belt, it's probably not the right fit. And as Andy was kind of saying, with even just from a pricing standpoint with something like HubSpot automations.
I'm guessing for you guys, is the hub of it Intercom, would you say? Or
for client interaction, definitely Intercom. HubSpot is when you're a bit more into the kind of aggressive sales drip versus support or just kind of your typical onboarding flow. More of like that's more of targeted sales. So like obviously workflow and collaboration is Nifty, then HubSpot. I know one thing a couple of our marketers really like are like Hrefs. Ways to understand your competition and like similar web stuff like that to get a sense of backlinking and stuff. And I'm sure a wealth more about that than I do.
Yeah, as far as like tools for doing the analysis of keywords and content and your just like search engine marketing, the two big ones are Ahrefs and SEMrush. SEMrush. To distinguish it from Ahrefs, it has a bit more on the paid ad side that Ahrefs doesn't. But that all being said, I personally am a bit more biased towards Ahrefs. I like their data, I like their interface and user experience a bit better. We got one question. Since there are many digital tools, how do you choose which ones to stick with? Right. time, I guess. I mean, we've definitely implemented the wrong tool on occasion. And in some instances, I feel like we're still finding the right tools. But how do you choose which one to stick with? If it's a type of thing that you can demo, and it's some like tool that you need, if you haven't yet chosen a CRM, if you haven't yet chosen your marketing automation software or keyword research software, I just like demo them and compare them side by side, and I'll like do the 30-day trial or 2-week trial, and I try to get as much done as I can with each of them at the outset, and make a decision and just stick with it, and try not to second guess myself, because that also, the shiny object, there's a new tool out that does this one thing and you've already committed to it. Unless there's a new tool, unless the new tool that you see out there is just a million miles ahead of the tool you're already using, I would try to ignore it and not second guess having chosen the tool that you have. Unless you're hearing from a lot of other people, maybe that this tool that you've chosen is poor and you've made a huge mistake. And I've definitely had that in the past too. How about you, Sky? What's your experience about choosing tools?
I think and this is kind of what you're harking to, the allure of features is always there. You know what I mean? But using based off features, I think will lead you down to having a lot of tools because this one does this and that one does that, versus really think of it as the problem you're looking to solve. And that problem, that problem will probably change as you go along. So this doesn't necessarily need to be the thing that you're doing forever, but just if you can understand this is what this tool is supposed to do for me. And then as you use it, you might find, I really wish it did this, or it doesn't do that, but everything else it does is so seamless and easy that I save so much time that doing that one extra thing somewhere else or a different way is actually still more efficient than picking up a new solution that has 3 times the features, 3 times the cost. And I'm sitting here batting my head against the wall because I don't know how to make heads and tails of the thing. So I think, and you made a great point. A lot of these tools have demos, use them. And I mean, like, use them, because the biggest thing we see is like, the people who don't really use a demo don't get a good understanding of it. So you try to visualize what it's like to use it and work on it. If they have importers, use an importer. It doesn't mean your stuff's going to be there forever, but it helps like, is this really how is this going to work well for me and my team? And then you'll notice sometimes some tools just start to kind of get ejected if they just don't really fit.
And I'm sure like you could also say, like, Sky, from the experience as being in the company, that your users who really put it through its paces in the test drive during that trial end up becoming much more in terms of active users. Oh,
absolutely. I mean, I don't know the exact stat, but I want to say something like sure. If someone invites a second teammate on Nifty, their chances of becoming a paid customer is up like 80% or something like really astronomical, because it just means like they're actually using it versus like logging in, oh, yep, there's this and that. And okay, like it's so many of these tools are built around experience. So just kind of giving it a chance of that experience. It's like a roller coaster, right? You could look at it and say, that one looks fun, but like you got to ride it to really know.
Yeah. I think adding user, that's a really interesting point, especially just because like, if you're a small team and if you're a startup and you're trying different things out, you may be like the person tasked with checking out this app. But if you don't have buy-in for the rest of the team, then it's not going to get used. And so I'd say, like, if you can, like, spend an hour checking out this one tool, but once you've narrowed down your list, invite another teammate, have them check it out as well. And that'll get things moving forward and getting people to actually be using the app that you end up choosing.
And I think that's a really interesting point too, because if it's your job to find the tool that's going to work for you and your team, when you bring someone else in, make sure you're orienting it around the problems. Look, this is what we are running into, and this is why I think this tool will solve it. And you can even show them, because again, like selling on features is not stable ground. Selling on experience, selling on solving problems is how products ultimately explode.
I'd be very interested to know at this point here, because going back to the question that we also had on how do you choose and what's the right one. Now, both of you are somehow taking this all-in-one approach, like this is also how you communicate it partially on the external. Do you see the future of such tools to be really an all-in-one solution that tries to cover a lot? You also mentioned, Sky, here, for example, that this will obviously increase prices. At some point, you can't deal with everything. So would you rather say choose, let's say, 3 to 4 bigger ones that can cover many areas, or would you rather go with individual solutions? Like the market is also right now developing into very segments, like very niche products. How would you go about it? Or how do you guys feel about when you start up a business? Should you go first for a big solution and then choose smaller ones around it? Or what would your approach be for next time?
I mean, I think when getting started, especially, try and focus as narrowly on a problem as possible. Because like Sky was mentioning earlier, if you just try and go big, especially at the outset, you end up doing like a lot. You do a lot of things, but none of them amazingly well. And that's not going to get people excited about it. But if you really solve one specific problem, you're going to get a lot more buy-in, and then you can move from there. Your ultimate goal may be to be this hub tool that everyone's using for some part of a workflow. But if you don't, I think as far as like being that startup, trying to get customers using it and involved and getting you further along, you really have to start much more narrow, that MVP approach.
100%.
When you answer that, take the approach from a startup perspective. Now put the other hat on, that you're not developing that tool for somebody else, but you're yourself looking out for tools to choose out there. Would you rather recommend go with a bigger solution first and then the others, or how would you approach this as a startup, like first or second time entrepreneur?
I think the answer is the same. I think it's all about problem. Like if 3 big tools solve 80 to 90% of what you're looking to do, and another part of your problems as a startup is going to be cost. Like, let's be real. So also knowing that that's a problem, and does it address that problem too? For the first couple months of your bootstrapping, you might need to hack it with a solution, a myriad of free solutions. And that's actually, a little anecdote there. Nifty realized that we had a free plan, and we had very little movement from free to paid. And that's because people who are on our free plan tend to be people who were going to just use what they could from Nifty, then use what they could from another tool. And there's nothing wrong with that. But we realized that we couldn't continue to spend, support hours and energy on those people. So we actually ended up, people who are on the free plan got to keep it, but we sunsetted our free plan. And I think from being someone in that seat, I get it. But I think knowing what your problems are internally and how you're going to solve them is the best way to choose these tools. Obviously, the fewer logins you have to juggle, a little easier. The more concrete you can say, we use this tool for this. It's simpler than we use this tool when we have to do this, that, and another thing. Now it feels more and more niche.
Okay.
Most definitely. I think we really need to be mindful about, if you're bootstrapping your business, if you haven't raised any money, cost is absolutely a big factor. Like we had been using Trello because it was free, and they may never see a dime from us, because by the time that we're ready to move to a paid platform, we want something that's more robust, like Nifty. So yeah, I'm definitely mindful of the tools that are out there, you
might find that when you hit the ceiling on your free plan, whatever tool you're at, you might find that you kind of instinctually pull out your card and sign up. And that's a good feeling that this is the right one. And similarly, you might say all right, this is a great time to assess if this is really the right tool. Now I'm going to start paying for it. And you might do some due diligence and come back to where you are, and that's okay. But I think that's a good opportunity to say look, we're making some money, or we're willing to put more of our money into this based on the success we're having, but let's reassess the scope of the problems we're looking to solve with this tool, and do other tools do it better at an affordable rate.
I think you've made a very valid point here. And this is a mistake that many startups do, that they try to do too much at a specific point in time, rather than focusing on really getting their market problem defined, looking where's the market need. Just like you approach a startup's problem, this is also how you should probably, and this is what we can hear from both of you, how you should approach also the selection of the right tools, identifying the need, and then just really finding the solution that is a good problem solution fit here. So I think that was great insight. I would like to go on with some questions, because right now there came many questions in. So let's go on with some of those questions here. Vanna asked, for example, now we talk about operating costs, right, on buying that. So she asked for a startup. Is it advisable now to outsource IT operations rather than using a tool for it to do it internally? What is your, or if you use a tool, then what is more suitable, like on the process on how to go about it?
Could you speak more to that, what you're talking about in terms of like outsourcing IT operations?
So maybe Vanna, you just quickly want to unmute yourself. You can clarify a bit on your question yourself. I just try to unmute you. Feel free to clarify. So right now she's not unmute yet. So maybe generally speaking, so sometimes what people do, for example, for specific development or for specific services, as they're so unknowledgeable about that, and even with a tool, they might not be able to execute it properly. Would you rather go and say, hey, whatever, try to internalize processes like that with a tool, or rather go outside and say, hey, just get it done from my side?
I mean, I tend to be scrappier. Like I've bootstrapped my businesses, and I would rather have control over the process and figure it out ourselves. Especially if like if you're outsourcing it, you're gonna end up spending a lot more money, at least on the initially. I'd say figure it out yourself, find the right tools, and then if further down the road, as your business makes more money, as you raise around, then possibly look to outsourcing if it's something that is taking too much time and it's taking too much time from your day. But otherwise, I would say be scrappy and figure it out.
Yeah. So, and I want to speak for you here, Andy, but as two guys who have both worked in agencies, we could both perhaps agree that if you're a young company, you probably don't want to contract an agency. They're built with a good amount of fat in there with intention, and agencies know that. That's how they make a living, right? So as appealing as an agency might come in and say, like, look, we have like all these Instagram influencers and we can like put your thing everywhere. It's like, there are scrappier, that's a great word, scrappier ways to do it. And they might not be pretty, but they're a lot more cost effective. Engineering is tricky, especially if you don't have a technical co-founder. I think what you're looking for ultimately in your engineering is just trust. And there's people in your country and there's people all around the world you can trust. And there's people in your country and people all around the world that you can't trust. And I think you just have to get a good sense of where and how to find those people who can really get you to where you need to be at a rate you can afford.
I think that fit perfectly actually into the next question that was being asked, because you already went into that. If you don't have coders in your team, how do you go about specific things? So Rahul took that same approach of saying, now, how do you think about the future of artificial intelligence, machine learning / machine teaching, actually playing a role in marketing for business owners, especially having a non-coding background? So do you feel that there is something developing there that will enhance the use of such tools in the future? Maybe at Andy, because this is more targeted at the marketing.
Possibly. I hope so. I'm cautiously optimistic. We'll see where all of this goes. It seems like in particular right now, the algorithms of machine learning are very based around knowing and tracking users and knowing their intent. And that's all great if there is a way that you can do something with all of that. I'm curious to see where it goes. I don't have any predictions, though.
Yeah, to that point, like, machine learning needs to have something to learn from. So I think, especially when you're early on, you might not have that user base that it can pour over and replicate or anything like that. And as far as engineering goes, similarly, I just think it's more important that you can find people that you can trust. And not to take credit away from the person who did it. I mean, our co-founder, or our founder rather, is, will spend all-nighters left and right interviewing people around the world, multiple interviews, getting a sense of their ability, just to have a sense if they're a right fit.
Right. Generally speaking, taking this question up now, this was more focused on the AI ML part. And you're absolutely right. Any artificial intelligence is only as good as you teach it and the data that you can provide and feed into it. But generally speaking, how do you see the future of digital tools evolving over the next 10 years? Do you feel that there is a change coming up? So this question is coming by Raquel here. So maybe you want to think about it, not just now from the AI part, but do you think there is a general trend that you can identify at the moment? Sky, go ahead on that first, maybe.
So I'll be the first to admit that I'm not incredibly up to snuff on machine learning and AI. I think what we're looking at is tools that are trying to become more interconnected. If that's done through AI, or I mean, I think we're already seeing that Open API is being kind of, if not replaced, at least supplemented with tools like Zapier or no code connection building tools. So I think before we see the singularity or something a little short of it, as far as tools kind of running themselves, I think we're going to see a lot more experiences that make it a lot easier to connect these tools without having a coding background before these connections start to just make themselves. I'm not worried about people being out of a job in the next 10 years because of machine learning, but I could be dead wrong about that.
See, this is why I don't want to predict anything, because I don't want like the video clip coming back like 10 years from now, like, hey, remember when you said this on that Zoom call?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Sky, like you're just boxing
I'm
yourself
done.
in
That's
right
it.
now.
Career's over.
You know, because
Maybe
Bill Gates said we would never need more than 16 megs of RAM, and now who's laughing?
Yeah,
I'm sure he's doing all right with that prediction.
I don't know.
you might even be the founders that 10 years down the road would create such tool that would go against your own perception.
Look, I'm in stealth mode. I'm trying not to tilt my hand, you know?
I totally get that, and that's totally valid. So maybe let's go to something that we already talked about, which is not going into future, but generally. So Summer was specifically asking you, Sky, on that you talked about earlier that investability is really about scalability. So he's asked, can you briefly tell me what is your definition of scalability in the digital market? Maybe explain a bit deeper on that.
Based on investor meetings I've had in the past and just kind of my understanding of the VC market, it's complicated, but it's really simple. It's like, if I give you X dollars, how will you make me Y dollars? And you can tell them the size of the market. You can tell them what you're doing today, but the idea isn't to lay down points. It's to lay down a trend. So if I can say, like, because I've acquired people at this amount with paid marketing or however you bring, and then I can expand my operations by this much by hiring, putting this much into these tools. And I know if, let's say, Google AdWords, which is probably a bad place to start for a lot of startups, but it depends really on your space. For example, in the workflow market, we're not bidding on AdWords. If we try to go toe to toe, would be squashed out. But we're getting really high visibility through content marketing and backlinking and other ideas. So however your methodology is, if I were to put oil in the machine, how does it grow? So I think, and part of that starts before you even talking to a VC. You want to talk about internally, how do I have a process that if I were to bring in 4 people tomorrow, how can I train them to do what I'm doing so I can get hands off? And it doesn't need to be totally figured out 100%, but I think the more you can think about your business as an operation that you're eventually going to kind of pass off, that's the groundwork for scalability. How can I do something or replace doing something with a tool to make it easier to expand the operation? And it's a really high level answer, but it's because it's kind of a high level question that is very different in every vertical and will fit differently into every investor's theses.
100%. I have nothing to add to that. Basically, exactly what Sky's saying. If someone gives you a bunch of cash right now, what could you do with it to grow? And you know what? You just said it perfectly. I got nothing else.
So Andy, Sky, directly a question to you. If somebody, I know both of you are so far bootstrapping, right? So you really try to build it from scratch. We had some separate discussions on maybe what you would have done differently next time. But where do you see yourself? So we talk about scalability. Both of you have run very successful campaigns on places like AppSumo or for example. Now the question that I'm asking myself, where do you see yourself? Maybe not 10 years down the road, that might be a bit too far. But when we talk about 3 years down the road, because like if startups talk to an investor, they have to lay out like, where am I getting in the next 3 years? And we talk about scalability of your product here. So maybe where do you see yourself with your products 3 years down the road? What will be different maybe about them?
Andy, you want to go first this time?
Sure. So in terms of like our product, for example, the next 3 years, it's a long time horizon, but in particular, we're early stage right now. So the main things that we're looking for are integrating with other link building and SEO tools that people are already using to make it a better, more indispensable part of your workflow. Growing out the methods and types of outreach campaigns that we have to make it a more indispensable tool. We're really focusing on the short term, and that's something that we're looking to deploy all right now. And then long term time horizon, just expanding further in terms of what our tool can do. Right now, we are very narrowly focused on this concept of finding opportunities and doing email outreach. Long term, as we expand beyond that, tools possibly for for maybe more of the life cycle of link building. That's what I'll say for that.
Yeah, I think Nifty, we're going to continue to focus on being a truly collaborative workspace rather than a tool where you come in to just make updates on what you've done today. It's where that work is being done. And I think it's important that at least from get-go, and it might change as you go along, but you can kind of have that vision in a sentence or two. Because as you're going to notice, especially if you have any degree of success, you're going to have competitors sign up for your tool. And all of a sudden, one of your features gets rolled out in a tool that's a lot bigger than yours. And the first time it happens, it's like mind blowing. But then when you start to realize it's not about the feature, it's about the experience. And the more you can say like, look, what all this is telling me is that we're setting the market. We're kind of going in the right direction, that other people are willing to integrate this into their tools that are, public. And so in that case, I think as long as you're able to continue to stick to your vision, and that vision might change, but you know where you want to go, no amount of tools or features being ripped from you will stop you, because you're executing on a vision that other people are starting to buy in on, and they can kind of read that trajectory for you.
Very interesting. I actually would like to take up one part that you discussed here by Anjan as well. So thinking about now, so you talked about from a product building perspective, Sky a bit more going even deeper into the collaborative mode, Andy of integrating it even more, making it more seamless between other tools. So having Postala well positioned there. How do you see now in your development over the next years as well, but also from a current status? What percentage, so Anjan is asking both of you, what is the share of startups actually in your total customer base? So as of now, and maybe also, how do you think it will develop through the efforts you're taking throughout the next years, actually? So maybe you have actual numbers out there that you can put on the table. Andy, maybe you first, you start smiling on that.
I wish we had numbers like that. I don't have data to speak to what percentage of our customers are startups themselves. Really, most of what the feedback that I'm getting is through like my customer demos and things like that. And I'd say a lot of our users are ranging from agencies using our product for their client campaigns to bloggers and business owners, but it very much runs the gamut. I don't have any data about startups in particular, though.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I too do not have that data on hand. We might have the data. I'm not the data guy. But I would say a huge part of where that audience, especially early on, a huge part of who's using your tool is based on where you're visible. So, we have a pretty well-performing startup blog, best project management, 10 project management tools for startups. And go figure, Nifty's number one on the list, right? And that's where we're going to get a lot of startups. And if you go to somewhere like AppSumo, you're going to get a lot of startups, and you're going to get a lot of agencies and client-facing roles. If you go to Product Hunt, you're going to attract a lot of product managers. So I think a huge part of it is knowing your segment and who you think your segment is, and who it actually is buying your tool might change. But a huge part of that percentage is going to be built up of how you're putting your tool out there, who you're going after, where and how you're going after them.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I just saw that Anjan kind of said, okay, maybe not just startups, but also SMEs, maybe based on data that you're getting throughout the onboarding on employee size or revenue base. So for example, I mean, we ourselves use both of those tools. Both Nifty and Posara are part of our software tools play that we're playing here. So for example, I mean, do you get a feeling of the size of a team? For example, this is now targeted specifically at Sky because you have a team collaboration tool. How many people are actually then interacting within one license here that you can get a feeling of what are they using it for, or how big is the internal team size of people using it really for their processes?
Sure. I don't have those numbers offhand. I want to say something like last month we had 3 million messages sent on Nifty or something like that. So we do keep track of what experiences in Nifty are being engaged in by segmentation. Like we mentioned earlier, inviting people is really the first catalyst to getting a paid customer for us. I think to that point, you want to continue to understand who's coming in from where and why. So especially if we're working with a large organization, we're probably not going to, start with a wall-to-wall contract of 3,000 users up front, especially as a tool that's still bootstrapped. And some companies want to see that kind of vetted out internally before they expand. So then in that case, what we're starting to see is of a certain company size, we tend to get like the developers first because they're not very happy with Jira and Confluence, especially their managers who just like don't know Jira, like they don't even want to look at the thing. And so we find that that's kind of a good place to enter. But that really changes based on the size of the company and what market that company's in. So if you're working with an Ernst & Young, they're going to be viewing this a lot as a client relationship tool. So you want to put forward the ability to collaborate with guests and collaborate in general, have those proactive reports and kind of charting where you're going. So I think as you understand your segments better, you're also going to understand what in your tool, especially when you have a really wide tool like Nifty, what about in that tool is really the catalyst for conversion?
Mm-hmm. Very, very interesting here. The next two questions that are coming up, we're going back in that regard to collaboration, but not necessarily we have to give it back also to Sky as a question here. So I mean, Amara Hassanin asked, have you used or needed any Scrum tools? Which one is your favorite? I think I don't have to ask that, Sky. And neither the question that came in those especially difficult times on how you're creating a collaborative environment. I think both of them, if I would ask them, Sky, this would be a very clear answer. Maybe I ask you, Andy, in this regard, how do you now in times of Corona I mean, both of you apparently are sitting in home office. So how's that experience for you guys having a digital tool out there? How do you go about this right now in those times?
Yeah, in terms of creating a collaborative environment internally, my team's been remote since the beginning, so not that much has changed for us. So from the beginning, we wanted to make sure that we had tools that could foster a collaborative environment. The biggest one for us has been Slack and Google Docs. I've previously worked in an agency environment before where we were using Microsoft tools, Office 365, and like Word documents. And there's nothing quite frustrating like having a version of a document and then having to send it to someone else and get their feedback, as compared to Google Docs, where I could have multiple people on a document at once, looking at it in real time and making edits to it in real time. That has made like all the difference. Plug also for Nifty, which is a great collaboration tool, which I have to check out.
Thanks. Thank you. Yeah. So similar, as soon as we, Corona hit, especially in New York, we're both New York based. Everyone in New York really just kind of like turtled up really quickly in their dinky New York apartments. So that part's not very fun. I think we could probably both say we miss the nightlife and what's going on around. But I think as far as collaborating, it really, and I think you mentioned this earlier, Marcus, it helped us assess what was deficient from today in that. And because of that, like, we brought Zoom calls right into Nifty to make it, another thing that's more collaborative. So we did have a remote team, largely remote team before that. It's now entirely remote. But I think what's also changed is understanding why people are coming to your tool. And even something like Postaga, all these tools are now kind of, they're no longer tools that you use as you just kind of sit there and talk to someone next to you. Now they're kind of self-contained experiences that you have to, unless you're working in a hybrid office or you're back in, you're going to be communicating with either someone from the tool or someone on your team through a chat window, right? So I think the more that these tools can kind of help you on your own and serve as through the lens of customer experience, I think that's what's really going to help these tools separate themselves, because a lot more of this is like you're on your own. You know what I mean? You're going through help docs more than just turning to the person next to you who's used this tool 2 weeks more than you have.
Right.
Most definitely. And customer onboarding is so important, especially we've done a lot of testing with user walkthroughs. Like our onboarding today looks nothing like it looked when we first were in beta, in part because you may have an idea of how people are going to use your tool and how they end up actually using it. And from the live chats that you get, to the support tickets you get, to the screen recordings that you see, and you're just scratching your head like, oh, well, I guess that button shouldn't be red, should it? Or something like that. So if you are building a product, absolutely avail yourselves of all these tools, from Hotjar and heat mapping tools to screen recording tools, to having a live chat on your product or your website so people can reach out to you in real time. Especially, I know it doesn't necessarily scale if that's not something that you're ready for, but especially as you're trying to get those first customers, you need to hear what their journey, you need to hear and see what their journey is like. And so if you can make yourself available, interview these early customers and early users, you can get a real sense of what their experience is like, because you're going to end up having people who like, oh, wow, they signed up, they logged in once and they never came back. I wonder why that is. And without more information from them directly, you're not going to know. And you may just assume everything is fine, and it may not be. So keep all of that in mind, especially as you're building your products.
I think that's very true. High touch points, especially early on, but throughout, just what you're doing in those touch points might change, but you're never done with feedback. And even like if you're not manually reaching out, if you need to start to automate like a post churn drip to kind of get that understanding, and maybe something like Andy would send a personalized message. Hey, I noticed you didn't sign up and your trial expired. Was there something you were expecting to see here that you didn't? And you can start to facilitate these conversations.
I couldn't agree more with you guys on the customer validation part. Actually, when we started our DueDash community, our very first monthly theme, so this monthly theme was on digital tools, our very first monthly theme was on customer validation, because we really want to show people, like even us, like on a daily basis, we do customer validation. Every poll that we put out there in the end is a customer validation, a feedback function. It's one of the beauties, by the way, for everyone to leverage our DueDash community platform as well, because you can run your own customer validation at all times. I can just underscore what you said. I've done eye tracking studies myself. You get so much of insights. They tell you how they use your product and how they go about it. The moment you look at the eye tracking, you get so much more insights that are happening subconsciously that you would have never figured out, because it's like a snapshot of a second sometimes where you actually get the information that you need. So I totally agree with what you guys said. And also at this point, with those two statements from your end, I would just like to also conclude today's session. I think you've done you've provided some really great insights on all those matters. Thank you very much at Andy and Sky. For everybody else here, the DueDash community platform is doing such monthly events on as they say, on a monthly basis, each month with a new topic, new experts from their area. If you want to follow up with Andy and Sky, feel free to get onto the platform. Both of them are there. You can get in touch with them if you want to know more about their tools. If you're looking for some discounts, once again, we're happy to provide those as well, as we're partnering with the tool. We wouldn't have gotten them here if we're not convinced of theirs as well. So thanks once again, Andy. Thanks, Sky, for your input for today's session. And for all others, Thanks for joining tonight's session and see you on our platform.
Thanks so much.
Take care.
Bye-bye.